In the year 408, Rome was not conquered by an army, it was being strangled by hunger. Outside the walls, the Gothic leader Alaric had cut the city away from its supplies. Inside, the Roman Senate counted what remained of an empire that had once taxed half the known world. Gold could be melted, silver could be weighed, silk and scarlet cloth could be carried through the gates. But among the ransom demanded to lift the siege was something far stranger: 3,000 pounds of black pepper. The most powerful city in the Western world was being asked to pay for survival with dried berries from a climbing vine thousands of miles away. Today, black pepper sits beside salt in restaurants, kitchens, cafeterias, and plastic packets. We twist a mill without thinking. Rome treated it as treasure. European merchants later crossed oceans for it. Armed companies used its trade to learn how to tax ports, command fleets, enforce monopolies, and govern foreign land. Black pepper did not single-handedly create the modern world, but it repeatedly exposed the machinery that did. It connected tropical forests to imperial dining rooms, Indian farmers to Roman tax collectors, Muslim merchants to Venetian warehouses, and European investors to corporations that carried cannons beside their cargo. The strange power of pepper came from a simple advantage. It was small, dry, durable, intensely flavored, and difficult for its richest customers to grow themselves. A handful could travel farther than fresh food, command a price far beyond its weight, and turn appetite into political power. So how did a wrinkled berry become valuable enough to appear in the ransom of Rome, desirable enough to redirect European ships around Africa, and ordinary enough to disappear into a shaker? The story does not begin in Europe, and it does not begin with explorers. It begins in a wet green landscape where pepper was not black, not dry, and not rare. If you like stories where ordinary food turns into empire, trade, obsession, and hidden history, subscribe to Food Empire History. Now, to understand how black pepper became this powerful, we have to go back to where the story really begins. Along the Western Ghats of southern India, monsoon rain gathers against steep forested hills. Water runs through red soil, trees hold heavy layers of green, and vines climb toward the light. Piper nigrum is not a tree, and its peppercorns are not true seeds in the way the name suggests. It is a tropical climbing plant whose small fruits grow in narrow hanging spikes. When the berries are fresh, they are green, smooth, and fleshy. Their familiar black surface is created by human work. Farmers harvest the spikes while most berries are still unripe. Heat and drying darken the outer fruit, shrink it around the hard center, and create the wrinkled peppercorn found in kitchens today. Let the berries ripen further, soak them, and remove the outer layer, and the same plant produces white pepper. Preserve the unripe berries before they darken, and they remain green. Three products that appear different on a shelf are different decisions made at harvest. The bite comes mainly from piperine, an alkaloid that activates heat-sensitive nerves in the mouth. It does not burn like a chili. Chili heat comes from capsaicin, a chemical from a completely different plant family that entered much of the Old World only after contact with the Americas. Pepper's heat is drier, slower, and surrounded by woody, citrus, floral, and earthy aromas concentrated in the fruit's outer layer. Grinding breaks that structure open. The smell rises quickly and then begins to fade. This is why freshly cracked pepper feels alive, while old powder can taste like dark dust. Exactly when communities of the Western Ghats first began managing wild vines is uncertain. Cultivation is ancient, but archaeology does not give us one clean moment when a forest plant became a crop. Domestication was probably not a single invention. It was accumulated knowledge, knowing which vines produced fuller spikes, which support trees held them best, how much shade kept roots cool when the first berries should change color, and how long they should dry beneath the sun. That knowledge belonged to the people of southern India long before foreign writers made pepper famous. Local farmers transformed a perishable berry into concentrated flavor that could survive storage, taxation, and an ocean voyage. Drying was the first empire-making technology in pepper's story. It removed water, reduced weight, slowed decay, and preserved the quality that distant consumers wanted most. The vine grew in one humid region, but its dried fruit could travel through many worlds. Pepper entered food, medicine, and systems of status across South Asia. Indian medical traditions combined pepper with other pungent ingredients, while cooks used it not as a mysterious luxury, but as part of a deep regional vocabulary of spice. Yet its meaning changed the moment it moved away from the landscape that produced it. Close to the vine, pepper was agricultural knowledge and seasonal labor. Farther west, every transfer added distance, uncertainty, tax, and prestige. The route was not a simple line from India to Rome. Pepper moved through a crowded Indian Ocean already shaped by Indian, Arab, Persian, East African, and Southeast Asian sailors and merchants. They understood seasonal monsoon winds that could carry ships across open water and bring them back months later. Ports on the Malabar coast connected inland growers to brokers, warehouse owners, ship captains, moneylenders, and customs officials. Pepper became valuable not because Europeans suddenly discovered it, but because Asian and African commercial networks had already made long-distance movement possible. One port became almost legendary. Ancient Mediterranean texts called it Muziris, a major trading center on or near the coast of present-day Kerala. Its exact location remains debated, but its commercial importance is not. A surviving Roman-era document known as the Muziris Papyrus records the financing and taxation of a South Indian cargo carried on a ship called the Hermopollon. The cargo included pepper alongside ivory and aromatic goods. This was not a traveler returning with a small pouch. It was organized, insured, financed, and taxed international commerce. At the Red Sea port of Berenike in Egypt, archaeology has supplied the physical answer. Excavators found a large vessel containing more than 7 kilograms of black peppercorns, an extraordinary concentration from the Roman world. Those berries had crossed the Arabian Sea, entered the Red Sea, reached a desert port, and then faced another journey by road and river toward the Mediterranean. By the time pepper reached a Roman kitchen, its price contained every hand, ship, warehouse, toll, risk, and delay along the route. Roman cooks used pepper with remarkable enthusiasm. The collection of recipes known as apicius places it in sauces, meats, vegetables, wines, and sweets. It was not merely sprinkled on top. Pepper could be pounded with herbs, mixed with fermented fish sauce, sharpened with vinegar, softened with honey, and used to build the layered flavors admired in elite Roman cooking. Its repeated appearance reveals more than taste. It shows that Rome's wealthy consumers had grown accustomed to a supply chain reaching beyond the empire's own borders. The famous ransom of 408 makes sense inside that world. Alaric did not demand pepper because it was magical, and the Romans were not using it as an ordinary coin. It was a compact, recognizable store of commercial value, something elites desired and merchants could resell. Pepper stood in the ransom beside gold, silver, silk, and scarlet hides because it belonged to the same world of portable wealth. Rome weakened, but pepper's roots survived by changing hands. Through the medieval centuries, merchants based in the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean continued to move spices west. Muslim trading communities played central roles in carrying pepper from Indian ports toward markets in the Middle East. From Alexandria, Venetian and other European merchants purchased it for distribution across the continent. No single people secretly controlled the entire journey. The system was a chain of specialists, and every specialist understood a different sea, language, currency, or political border. In Europe, pepper became both flavor and performance. A household that served it demonstrated access to a distant commercial world. It appeared in noble kitchens, medical preparations, gifts, rents, and account books. A token payment could be described as a peppercorn rent, a legal echo of an age when even a tiny quantity carried recognized value. Yet one popular story should be discarded. Medieval elites did not buy costly pepper simply to hide rotten meat. Anyone wealthy enough to afford imported spice could usually afford fresh food. Pepper was wanted because people liked its taste, believed in its dietary and medicinal qualities, and understood what displaying it said about rank. By the late Middle Ages, the pepper on a northern European table might have passed through growers in India, coastal brokers, ship owners in the Arabian Sea, merchants in Cairo, customs officials in Alexandria, Venetian wholesalers, Alpine carriers, and local retailers. The berry was small. The chain around it was enormous. That chain also produced resentment. European rulers and merchants could see fortunes being collected at every stage before the spice reached them. They did not merely want pepper, they wanted to remove the people standing between its source and their profit. This desire helped push Portuguese expansion down the coast of Africa. The voyages were driven by several ambitions, including Christian alliance, gold, political rivalry, and access to Asian trade. Pepper was not the only prize, but it was one of the most reliable. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached Calicut, now Kozhikode, on the Malabar coast. European retellings often present this as the moment India was opened to the world. The reality was the reverse. Da Gama entered a sophisticated port, already connected to merchants from across the Indian Ocean. His arrival mattered because an armed Atlantic kingdom had finally reached an existing Asian marketplace by sea. The first encounter did not produce instant mastery. Portuguese gifts looked unimpressive beside the goods already circulating in Calicut. Local rulers and merchants had their own interests, alliances, and sources of power. Portugal responded not by peacefully replacing the old system, but by attempting to force itself into it. Forts appeared. Cannon-armed ships patrolled sea lanes. The Portuguese crown created the Estado da India, a web of ports, officials, fleets, and fortified positions stretching across the ocean. One instrument of control was the cartas, a naval pass that merchant ships could be required to carry. Vessels without acceptable papers risked seizure. Pepper was purchased through factories and weighing houses, moved toward Portuguese bases, and shipped around the Cape of Good Hope to Lisbon. The goal was not merely to participate in trade, it was to redirect trade through a system Portugal could license, tax, and defend with violence. But the phrase Portuguese monopoly can be misleading. The crown never sealed every harbor or inland road. Pepper could move through alternative ports, private deals, coastal craft, and older Red Sea routes. Local rulers resisted, merchants adapted. Smuggling was often simply commerce conducted outside rules imposed by a foreign navy. Portugal gained influence and profit, but the Malabar coast did not become a silent European warehouse. Its political complexity repeatedly defeated dreams of total control. Still, the Cape route changed the balance. Lisbon could send pepper directly into Atlantic Europe in quantities that challenged Venetian and Mamluk networks. The contest for spice no longer stopped at prices and tariffs. It moved onto oceans, where merchant ships carried soldiers and cannon, and where a trading contract could be backed by bombardment. Pepper had entered a new phase. It was no longer only cargo inside an empire. It was becoming one reason to build an empire around cargo. Then, Northern European competitors copied and expanded the model. At the end of the 16th century, English merchants feared being excluded from Asian commerce by Portuguese and Dutch rivals. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth granted a charter to the company that became the East India Company. its early business was aimed at the spice markets of Asia. On its first expedition, English ships captured a large Portuguese vessel carrying pepper and other valuable goods, then established trading positions in Southeast Asia. For years, pepper from Java remained a major part of company trade. 2 years later, the Dutch Republic chartered the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. It received powers that blurred the line between business and government. It could negotiate treaties, build forts, command troops, and wage war. Investors bought shares in a corporation whose employees operated thousands of miles away with state-like authority. Pepper did not invent the joint stock company, but spice. Profits gave this new corporate form one of its earliest global arenas. The Dutch fought the Portuguese, competed with the English, and pursued monopolies across Asia. On the Malabar coast, the VOC tried to secure pepper through treaties, political pressure, and control of ports. Yet it encountered the same problem Portugal had faced. Pepper grew across a difficult landscape. Farmers, brokers, rulers, and coastal traders had alternatives. Inland paths were hard to police. Whenever the company fixed prices too low or restricted buyers, pepper moved towards someone willing to pay more. From the corporate viewpoint, this was smuggling. From the producer's viewpoint, it was a market. This is the human cost at the center of pepper's empire story. The berry itself did not require the vast plantation slavery system later associated with sugar. Its violence came through the attempt to control circulation. European powers attacked ships, blockaded ports, imposed passes, seized cargo, coerced rulers, and turned commercial competition into naval war. The people who grew and moved pepper were pulled into struggles over prices and alliances they had not designed. The corporations learned from these struggles. They learned to combine private capital with public force. They learned to maintain forts, collect intelligence, negotiate unequal agreements, and punish trade outside their rules. The East India Company would later derive far greater power from Indian textiles, territorial taxation, tea, and opium than from pepper. It would be inaccurate to say a peppercorn conquered India. But pepper was part of the commercial training ground where armed companies practiced becoming political powers. There was also a quieter cost. The more distant consumers became from producers, the easier it was to erase who actually made the commodity. European maps showed sea routes and company possessions. Ledgers recorded weights, prices, losses, and duties. They rarely captured the patient work of tying vines to living supports, clearing drainage channels before monsoon rain, climbing to harvest spikes at the correct stage, separating damaged berries, boiling or blanching them, and turning them repeatedly as they dried. Empire celebrated the captain. Pepper depended on the farmer. In the long run, no European company could preserve Malabar's geographic advantage forever. Pepper vines were propagated and cultivation spread through Southeast Asia. Java, Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, and other tropical regions developed important production. The old bottleneck began to break. The spice no longer had to come through one coastal zone, and the growth of multiple origins weakened any single monopoly. During the 19th century, faster ships, steam transport, expanding ports, standardized grading, and industrial finance made global trade more predictable. The pepper mill also became a familiar object. In 1874, Peugeot introduced a table pepper mill with a steel grinding mechanism, turning whole peppercorns into fresh seasoning at the moment of use. The same industrial culture that produced gears, mills, cans, bottles, and branded packages was domesticating a spice that had once arrived as imperial treasure. The greatest transformation, however, was not the grinder, it was abundance. Pepper cultivation expanded far beyond its original forest world. In Vietnam, production grew until the country became the central force in global exports. In Brazil, Japanese immigrant farmers helped establish pepper in the Amazon region during the 20th century, carrying planting material and agricultural knowledge into a new continent. A crop once associated with one Indian coast became a tropical global commodity. Factories cleaned, sorted, sterilized, ground, blended, and packed pepper at scales no medieval merchant could imagine. Whole peppercorns entered mills and left as uniform powder in tins, sachets, seasoning mixes, sauces, processed meats, snack coatings, and restaurant packets. Industrial food companies did what earlier empires had never fully achieved. They made pepper consistent, anonymous, and cheap enough to be everywhere. That anonymity changed flavor as well as history. Whole pepper protects much of its aroma until the shell is broken. Pre-ground pepper exposes a large surface area to air, allowing volatile compounds to disappear. Convenience won, but intensity weakened. Modern consumers often shake on more because the product has already lost the brightness that once made a small amount extraordinary. The spice became common, partly by becoming less vivid. Today, the global pepper economy produces well over 500,000 metric tons in a typical recent year. India remains central to the crop's history and genetic diversity, while Vietnam dominates export flows and Brazil, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and other producers form major parts of the supply. The pepper beside your salt may have crossed an ocean, but unlike a Roman banquet guest, you are rarely told which farm, variety, or harvest produced it. Behind the low price are smallholders exposed to a volatile market. When prices rise, farmers plant more vines. Because pepper takes years to mature, the new supply arrives later, sometimes creating a glut. Prices then fall, investment stops, vines are neglected or replaced, and another shortage can begin. The cycle that once enriched merchants can leave growers carrying the risk between one harvest and the next. The plant itself is vulnerable. Pepper prefers warmth and moisture, but too much water around its roots can encourage devastating disease. Phytophthora foot rot can attack vines and reduce production severely. Changing rainfall, heat, soil exhaustion, and intensive cultivation add pressure. The wild relatives and traditional varieties of the Western Ghats are therefore not museum pieces. Their genetic diversity may contain traits needed to protect future harvests. Pepper also remains vulnerable to the oldest temptation in long-distance trade, selling appearance instead of substance. Ground spice is harder to inspect than whole berries. Researchers and regulators have found pepper mixed with spent material, plant husks, coffee residues, or papaya seeds. The fraud is modern, but the logic is ancient. Once origin disappears and powder replaces the recognizable fruit, trust becomes another commodity in the package. Yet there are signs of a different future. Single origin producers, farmer cooperatives, traceability programs, and buyers working directly with growers are trying to return names and places to pepper. A peppercorn from Kerala, Kampot, Sarawak, Lampung, or the Vietnamese Central Highlands does not have to taste identical. Soil, rainfall, variety, ripeness, drying, and storage all leave a mark. The more precisely pepper is known, the harder it becomes to treat farmers as invisible and flavor as a standardized black speck. This brings us back to the mill on the table. Hold one peppercorn between your fingers and it seems almost weightless. It contains no obvious sign of Rome's ransom, the monsoon route to Muziris, the warehouses of Alexandria, Venetian ledgers, Portuguese cannon, Dutch treaties, English shareholders, Vietnamese hillsides, or Brazilian immigrant farms. History has been dried so completely that it fits inside a shell. Turn the grinder and the shell breaks. For a few seconds, the aroma that made pepper valuable rises again. That moment is the perfect image of its history. A small object releases something far larger than itself. Flavor becomes demand. Demand becomes a root becomes a monopoly. A monopoly attracts ships, investors, laws, and weapons. Then abundance reverses the process, shrinking an imperial prize into an everyday habit. Black pepper was never truly ordinary. It only became familiar enough for us to stop asking where it came from. Its greatest historical power was not that it was worth its weight in gold, because that claim changes with time and place. Its power was that millions of people kept wanting it after the first shock of heat had faded. Rulers could tax that desire. Merchants could transport it. Corporations could organize around it. Farmers could build livelihoods from it, while carrying risks hidden from the final consumer. The next time you lift a pepper mill, listen to the brief crack of the berries inside. It is the sound of a tropical fruit becoming portable, a local crop becoming global, and a flavor becoming a system. 3,000 pounds once appeared in the ransom of Rome. Now a few grams wait beside your dinner. The distance between those two images is the history of black pepper. If this story changed the way you see black pepper, subscribe for more hidden food history.